May the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Amen. This is the second week that we have had stories about Jesus calling his disciples. And whenever something like this is repeated in our lectionary, just a reminder that our lectionary is the Revised Common Lectionary. So the readings for each Sunday have been pre-chosen. It's not something that I choose, just so you know. So when the lectionary has, readings that are very similar 2 or 3 weeks in a row, there's something really important they want us to understand. So what is it that is important about Jesus calling his disciples? In terms of the storyline of the gospel, we could say it's still the setup phase. We haven't even gotten into the heart of what the story is yet. And in a way, that's true. We haven't heard much yet about Jesus' ministry, about his teaching and healing, about his inclusion of those who were utterly scorned by the culture at large. We could say that the story is just being set up. On the other hand, if we look at this not in terms of a linear progression of the story, but a more circular progression, then we really are in the heart of the story already. When Jesus calls his disciples and they respond immediately, as Mark says, and without question, we should know that there is something significant going on, something significant that has already taken place. Maybe they know Jesus, maybe they know him by his reputation, or maybe that experience of love that I talked about last week is just so profound that they cannot resist following. But it's not like Jesus just calls these few folks, 12 people to be exact, and then goes on with his work. Jesus is continually calling disciples. He is continually calling others to follow him, to do the work of the gospel, to teach, to heal, to be part of community, to live for God and not for self, to look out for the poor and destitute, the widow and the orphan, to love and to be agents of God's redemptive grace. The calling of people to join him in this work never ends. In the church, we often talk about call as something for the clergy. I experienced a call to priesthood, and when I went to be interviewed and to meet with the bishop, they wanted to hear about my call. I also experienced a call to this congregation. In smaller ways, I have felt a call to do some work in our diocese, teaching those who have just been ordained, working with other churches in our area as the dean of our deanery, and serving in other capacities like, the summer weeks that I spend at Camp Stevens, or being on the standing committee of the diocese. That's all part of my call. The call is not just for clergy. Jesus calls every one of us to do the work of the gospel. I have a friend who her whole life has so clearly been a veterinarian. When I had told her that about 15 years ago, she was about 17 at the time, I think, she looked at me like I was crazy and said, "No way am I ever doing that." Today, she is finishing her second year of vet school. It suits her perfectly. I have another friend who has such a clear call to work with children, both as a teacher, she teaches first grade, and often works with other teachers in teaching them how to teach kids how to read, and also as a mother. She does both jobs amazingly well. I'm sure you can think of people in your own life who are so clearly suited for the work that they do. There are other types of call as well, not necessarily related to the work we do in the world. I remember asking my dad why he continued being the treasurer of his church. He was treasurer for some 40 years, for the majority of my life. He told me that my mom was really good at praying, but he wasn't so good at praying, so this was his way of praying. his way of offering back to God what had been so generously given him. Bringing a meal to the meal program we participate in. Helping a child in Palestine to get an education. Working with Manna, the local food bank. Donating blood. All these things are called. Being part of the leadership of this church. Working with our kids in Sunday school. Being on the altar guild. Being a lector or an usher. All of that is called too. Some folks have a call to help others in what might seem like small ways. But what a difference that help can make. Maybe it's just something as simple as giving a friend a ride to the doctor, or being a solid, listening heart for someone who's going through a rough time. Maybe you're the person who's the thumb in the dike person who goes around patching the holes in an organization so that things continue running smoothly. All of that is call. And then there are the calls of relationship, of mother, father, spouse, friend, sister, brother, aunt, uncle, mentor. That's call too. I think you're probably getting the idea that call is not so much about what we do, but what it is inside of us that motivates us to do it. So if you would, I'd like you to break out the hymnal. Don't worry, we're not going to sing. I want you to check out a hymn. The hymn is hymn 293. I think a lot of you will probably know this one. This is a hymn that we use often for All Saints' Day, but it's a great look into what it means to answer the call and where call comes from. So I'll read it aloud, you just follow along with me. I sing a song of the saints of God, patient and brave and true, who toiled and fought and lived and died. For the Lord they loved and knew. And one was a doctor, and one was a queen, and one was a shepherdess on the green. They were all of them saints of God, and I mean God helping to be one too. They loved their Lord, so dear, and his love made them strong. And they followed the right for Jesus' sake, the whole of their good lives long. And one was a soldier, and one was a priest, and one was slain by a fierce wild beast. And there's not any reason, no, not the least, why I shouldn't be one too. They lived not only in ages past, there are hundreds of thousands still. The world is bright with the joyous saints who love to do Jesus' will. You can meet them in school or in lanes or at sea, in church or in trains, or in shops or at tea. For the saints of God are just folk like me, and I mean to be one too. Do you recognize that hymn? Yeah, it's a great hymn, I think. It's got a nice catchy melody too. I wish I could sing it for you. I think the thing that's great about this is it shows the diversity of call, but what is held in common is where that call comes from. That love of God, that desire to do God's will, and really being in relationship with God. So you can put your hymnal away, and now I'd like you to take out your prayer book. This will be our last, so I'm going to let you in on a prayer book secret. Let's see. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go to, so the prayer book has lots of little nuances in it that when you spend a lot of time with it, you start to pick up. So let's see. I want to turn to page 362. On page 362, so it says, therefore we praise you, there's that paragraph. And then there's the rubric, the little parts in italics we call rubrics. And then it's the Sanctus, holy, holy, holy. And then right under that, there's another rubric that says, the people stand or kneel. Do you see that? So what that's telling us is standing is the preferred thing to do at this part of the Eucharist, but kneeling is also okay to do. But the prayer book's saying, standing is what we like, kneeling is totally fine if that's what you want to do. It's very, very Anglican, very Episcopalian. If we went to Rite 1, it would be reversed. It would say, the people kneel or stand. Because in Rite 1, kneeling is preferred, while standing is okay to do. All right? So that's the first thing I want to show you. The second is, go to page 355. The very top, it says the Holy Eucharist Rite 2, which is of course what we're doing right now, and then it says the Word of God. And then the rubric underneath says, a hymn, psalm, or anthem may be sung. That means we don't have to. We don't have to sing a hymn, a psalm, or an anthem. We may. However, right underneath that, it says, the people standing, the celebrant says. So that's not optional. Whenever we see the word may in the prayer book, it means it's optional. When it just says, the celebrant does this or the people do this, that means that it's something that we have to do. So we always have an acclamation at the beginning of our liturgy, because that's what the prayer book tells us to do. Okay, so that's prayer book secret number 2. Now I want you to turn to page 855. This is in the Catechism, and if you've never read the Catechism, I encourage you to do so. It's a great teaching on who we are as a church and what our beliefs are. It's also beautifully designed in question and answer format, meaning the answers are not conclusive, but they're meant to be a starting point for you to discover what all this means for you. So, under the ministry, who are the ministers of the church? The ministers of the church are laypersons, bishops, priests, and deacons. Who's listed first? Laypersons. Priests, we're expendable. Truly, we are expendable. But the laity are who the church is. So if you remember the first little prayer book secret I taught you, that the preferred or what's more important comes first, that's why lay people are listed first. Now let's read the next one. What is the ministry of the laity? The ministry of laypersons is to represent Christ and his church, to bear witness to him wherever they may be. And I think that's important because priests, we hang out in the church most of the time. We meet with you, we handle the administration of the church, we do pastoral care. I'm out in the community some, but not like all of you are. So your work is really important that way. You can do way more than a priest can. According to the gifts given them, to carry on Christ's work of reconciliation in the world, and to take their place in the life, worship, and governance of the church. That's the ministry of the laity. So when we talk about call, when I talk about call, when these readings come up and you're thinking about what this means for you, do not underestimate the power that you hold and the importance of your call to ministry. It really is essential to the life of the church and essential to the building of God's kingdom in our world today. What you do is absolutely essential.